Many thanks for taking some time from your busy afternoon to attend the webinar today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cato Rolea. I lead a fairly busy life, but I do work for SMS Higher Education Group, now UAP, on a variety of roles. So I do provide advice and guidance on university partnerships, on UAP development, outside of SMS Higher Education Group and UAP. I also work for an organization that works on behalf of the government that's called ECTIS, that deals with international education, admissions, visa provision for students, and for immigration purposes. And I also run my own startup, which is AI powered and leverages some of the latest AI technology in the sector to address a variety of issues. So again, today we're going to talk about the very broad scope of artificial intelligence. And I do have quite a lot of slides. And the reason I have a lot of slides is not necessarily because I'm going to go through all of them, but rather that there's so much to cover. And we might have to just focus on certain things, especially because I'd like to give you the chance to ask any questions so we can have conversations about certain topics, but also, for the purposes of potentially having a part two, because the topics increase so much at the moment that, including everything in about 40 to 45 minutes doesn't really do it justice. It's a very complex topic. It's something that's advancing rapidly. We're soon going to be seeing an increased adoption pretty much in every sector. Higher education is one of the main sectors where AI will have a huge impact. Universities traditionally are not necessarily known for being the first to adopt technology. The industry usually comes in first. Education sector, kind of stays a bit behind, but then what happens, they will rely on partners from the industry, so potentially on UAP or SMS Higher Education to help them bridge the gap, or maybe kind of catch up with the latest adoption or the latest best practices in the industry. So what I'm going to be focusing on today will be, just a sec. There we go. So what I'm going to be focusing on today is some introductory concepts around artificial intelligence, breaking a few misconceptions about artificial intelligence, what the difference between traditional AI or machine learning and generative AI is, the applications of AI broadly in or within the higher education and the wider education sector, but also the power that AI could potentially hold in terms of transformation. That's whether it's business transformation, digital transformation, educational transformation. We can talk all day about different types of transformation and how AI is going to impact all of these areas. But I mean, if we take a step back and go, at the very basics. So what is AI? So I think AI is being conceptualized and it's been around for about 70 years, I'd say, if I'm being slightly conservative with the terminology, but it is something that we've kind of grew up with, or we've used frequently without necessarily knowing that it is there. It's always kind of worked in the background. Recently it started to become way more advanced or way more prominent, because now we can interact with it way more than we could before. So if you have a look at this definition from 2017 by an academic, a Romanian academic at the University of Charles Darwin in Australia, he coined a definition in 2017, which I think is still very relevant today, to describe AI as computing systems that are able to engage in human-like processes such as learning, adapting, synthesizing, self-correction, and use of data for complex processing tasks. So I think in a nutshell, it is true that's what AI does. It's still valid for anything that you might think that is AI or that is coined as AI. But what's interesting is that as soon as generative AI came out, and let's just frame it to ChatGPT. Generative AI is way more than just ChatGPT, but if we just focus on that one, the OECD in November 23 slightly amended their own definition, which are now calling it a machine-based system that for explicit or implicit objectives infers from the input it receives how to generate outputs such as predictions, content, recommendations, or decisions that can influence physical or virtual environments. So the main difference that I want to highlight here is the last part, because for the first time, we have an international body that's drawing attention to something, and they're making quite a powerful statements. So if you look at this definition, the most important thing that's highlighted here is decisions that can influence physical and virtual environments. So we're already moving away from a system that's just in the background to process data and automate processes, but now to a system that can actively direct or can actively influence physical or virtual environments. So this is quite big because what this means is that AI now is moving to a semi-autonomous state, in which case it can be automated to the point that it can independently affect, the processes, the lives around us, and directly impacting our lives, whether it's in education, whether it's in business, whether it's in immigration. So there's quite a lot to unpick from this technology. And there's a reason for it, if we think about generative AI. So, if we look at this is a very broad kind of diagram that kind of shows what the broader artificial intelligence area is. And when we're thinking about ChatGPT, if you were to take a guess, would you know where to place ChatGPT? And I can give you a hint. ChatGPT, as part of a generative AI system, is a subset of a subset of a subset of a subset of artificial intelligence. So we go at the very top, we have artificial intelligence. That's the main kind of type of technology. Then we go down, that's machine learning. That's more statistical and data based. Then we go into neural networks. Neural networks is a subset of machine learning that tries to train computers just in the way that humans make connections when it comes about learning. So how we use our brains to make sense of information, they try to replicate that into a machine. And then when it comes to deep learning is the consequence of trying to think like a human in a machine terms. So ChatGPT or generative AI is a very small dot in the deep learning field. And that says a lot. However, I think what says even more is that we can now interact directly with generative AI, so with ChatGPT, without having to learn the main artificial intelligence system, machine learning, neural networks, deep learning. So I think the really transformative power of AI not only comes from the advancements in the technology itself, but in the power that now we have to interact with these models. If we think about if you think about in the past years, there has been some discussion about these algorithms on social media that, that really know us well, know what content to feed us. Anytime we talk about some product, maybe we'll see an ad, it will be, very clearly kind of signpost to us that, someone is kind of listening, that, this technology has started to understand us, maybe sometimes more than we understand ourselves. But we never really knew how it actually functions. We always knew it's in the back end somewhere. It's a black box. It's running behind the scenes. Yes, it's powering our phones. But now generative AI comes and says, well, here's ChatGPT, directly interact with this model, see what it, see how it behaves, see what it does. And not only that, not only as an end user, but as a technology creator. So what OpenAI have done, and the reason ChatGPT has become so famous over the years, is not because ChatGPT is great and it can do, it can generate and it can talk and it can write poetry and create images and so on, but rather because what OpenAI have done, they said, if you're building your technology, you don't need to invest in artificial intelligence, machine learning, neural networks, deep learning. You don't need to know any of this. All we'll give you a plugin. So that's an OpenAI API key. And you can directly call our model and build whatever technology you want. So in simple terms, for, in case I got a bit lost there with the technical terms, that means that without having to fully understand this system, I can build maybe 10, 15, 20, if I have a lot of coffee, maybe 50 of these models per day. So in one day, building, and that's just from one person, that's a significant increase in capability. And, and when we're thinking about companies that have this power, multiply that by 1,000 a day, multiply it by 10,000, by 100,000. So again, we are really facing a technology that we haven't seen before. And just to give you another kind of idea, I'm not going to go through the ecosystem itself, but AI, again, this is just to show just how complex it is, and only talking about generative AI that touches a bit on natural language processing, interacts with a lot of other components. Now, the interesting thing is that the generative AI kind of advances don't come alone. So one of the main systems we'll see increasingly kind of becoming very powerful is computer vision. Computer vision is another type of AI. It's not generative AI, but it's a type of AI that can easily understand visual things, just like we humans do. And then from understanding the visual things, it can use generative AI to start making autonomous decisions on our behalf. And I'll give you a very simple example. Apple is going to release a new iPhone. Microsoft has released new Surfaces. There's something very different about these new products coming. Each of these single products will have a microchip that will be running its own AI computer vision model on them. So we'll have them in our iPhones, we'll have them on our Surface tablets, we'll soon have them in pretty much every smartphone. What it means in practical terms is that Siri, for example, fast forward at the end of this year when the new Siri comes out, we'll be able to talk to Siri that will be able to fully understand everything about us based on everything we've ever done on our iPhones. And not just our actions, but our messages, to the point that I'm gonna ask Siri to schedule a call with my mom based on what we discussed 2 weeks ago, and Siri will automatically do it for me, or would automatically send a message to my mom and tell her, we've got a meeting coming up, might even send her an email. And again, he sounds very futuristic, and this is what we thought 20 years ago might be the future in 100 years' time. But all you have to do is just to watch Apple's latest keynote and updates on this type of technology. And this is just the beginning. Now, if we move forward again, I'm going to take a bit of a step back just to make a point. I'm not going to go through all these slides. I know it's 5 o'clock, but as I've said, AI has been around since the 50s. There's been a lot of hype cycles. So, in the 50s, people were very excited about AI. In the 60s, they thought we're going to all see robots by the end of the 80s, 90s. They didn't see it. So kind of expectation dropped down. In the early 2000s, we kind of started seeing a bit more of an interaction with AI, and that's especially when IBM released this model that could beat a chess player at chess, which never happened before. And they were like, wow, robots are smart. They can beat us at chess. We're going to get excited about stuff. However, the real excitement didn't really come until about 2010, when the IBM very smart, super smart chess robot was beaten by a new model. Now, what was different in this new model? It's a very simple difference. So the way you train a robot to play chess traditionally is you feed it a lot of data about a lot of chess games. Yeah. So you give it text, you give it maybe videos, you teach it the rules. So IBM collected data and trained their models for about 5 years. So they made their models super good at chess. No human could ever beat it. But then we had something like DeepMind, AlphaGo, that came about and said, well, we've built a new model, but we're going to train this model differently. So what these guys have done, they've looked at how our human brains work and said, well, our human brains work on neural connections, we're learning information, so we'll try to train a model on this way. So what they did instead was not give this new model text, books, information about the games or masters. All they did is teach the robot how to play chess. And then it instructed the robot to play itself until it became extremely good. And they trained it in about 4 hours. After that 4-hour training, it played the IBM computer and it beat it in 98% of the cases. So I think out of 100 matches they had, about 98 were in favor of the new type of model. That's the neural network model, the precursor to generative AI. So obviously, we're talking about some very powerful technology here. But obviously with great technology sometimes comes a bit of a great risk. And not sure if you've heard this word. I mean, I'm sure you've heard it before, but not sure if you've heard it into this concept. But we've got really two kind of groundbreaking or very interesting, to say the least, or scary concepts. On one hand, we have hallucination, and on the other hand, we have deep learning. And sometimes they go hand in hand because one influences the other. So Cambridge Dictionary in 2023, so last year, they actually said hallucinate is the word of the year because it's one of the most important words we'll be referring to in the next kind of short future. And it really refers to when an artificial intelligence goes beyond this training data and produces false information. So what does that mean? In very simple terms, it means hallucination means when a robot lies. So think about me training a robot with data that I give it, and then asking that robot a question, and then the robot pretty much saying to me something different, like making up a very confident lie. And that's not necessarily the scary part, because we're used to robots, sometimes not being truthful. The scary part is that we don't understand why they lie, and they do it very confidently. And it's not just, the problem is not that I don't understand it. I'm really not a genius to fully understand it, but not even the creators of ChatGPT. So you ask OpenAI, why does your model lie? They say, we don't know, but we'll give you money if you can try and help us find out. So that's what they've been doing. They've been, investing a lot of money for researchers to come in and identify, why do these very powerful models lie? How can we stop them from lying? Or at least, how can we detect when they lie? And that's scary when we have one of the most powerful technologies happening at the moment that no one really fully understands. And we're not only talking about lying. Now we're going to the other side, where it's deep learning. You will have heard the terminology. Oh, we have ChatGPT 3, we have 3.5, we have 4, now we have 4.0. Now we have 4.0 for omni-channel. We're going to have 4.5, we're going to have 5. Gemini has a lot of, model itself. But again, another scary thing is that no one really understands how these models learn so quickly. The gaps that have happened in the past 2 years have been incredible. I mean, in terms of reasoning, of capabilities, what the developers and the technologists do understand is that these models require a lot of data. So that's, they will feed them the data, but they don't understand how they learn the information and at which point they upgrade. And in very human terms, I'll give you an example. So when ChatGPT came out in its earlier version, it was estimated that it had the reasoning ability of a 2-year-old. When GPT 3.5 came out, it had the reasoning ability of a 5-year-old. When 4 came out, they said, well, I think now it could be a 7, it could be an 8-year-old, but they didn't understand how it became so powerful at reasoning. So the question is really like, what's bothering us, or what's bothering the technology world, is how can we know when these models will become smarter than us? Where is the line that we can draw? And can we talk about super intelligence? Can we talk about general intelligence? I mean, who knows? These are very hard questions, and these questions are being asked now to the universities, because all of a sudden now you have all these very powerful technology. And now ChatGPT's made their most powerful model free. So you've got all these students that are on, pretty much academic steroids. They can produce essays, they can produce courses, they can produce, they can answer very complicated questions. And academics don't really know how to detect, they don't know how to respond. There's services such as Turnitin that claim to be able to detect AI, but they're not really good at it. The universities have been rejecting it because there's not enough data to suggest, these tools are actually any useful. But also, what's interesting to see is that, if they're looking at work that was produced by an international student whose first language is not English, Turnitin is more likely to classify it as AI generated, simply because, someone that doesn't speak English as a first language will think about things and will write things slightly different than native students. So, so to some extent, using, a kind of a service like Turnitin to try and detect AI generated work puts international students at a disadvantage. And the universities are very good at picking this up. So that's why, the Quality Assurance Agency in the UK, that provides advice to all the higher education institutions in the UK, advises against institutions using Turnitin for AI detection purposes. And I think there's a lot of pressure on universities now to pretty much reinvent, to some extent, the learning experience, and not just the assessment experience, but how are we going to think about learning when it comes to providing students with, genuine information and providing them with real skills, when they can just go home and ask ChatGPT to write them a 5,000 words essay or do their math problem and so on. And the next problem we're probably going to think about is, when these machines get to a level that we can't supervise anymore. So we can see here, in traditional ways, we've always had oversight of what machines learned, but in the future, we won't have the same capacity. So we're really under pressure as a whole society now to understand how can we supervise these models and how can we make sure that these models are not going to become dangerous to our own well-being. There's been a lot of studies done in the past couple of years, and there's been quite a lot of estimation on when generative AI will reach human capabilities. And the most conservative kind of opinions will say about 2070. Interestingly, they've recently redone this study and they said they're actually a bit off. They do consider that most of these human level capabilities would be achieved in the next 20 years, if not earlier. There's still a bit of a hope there that, you know, when it comes to social and emotional reasoning and social and emotional sensing, it's still assumed, at least, or estimated, that this is where AI will fall short. So, you know, the very essence that still makes us humans and that give us this, you know, this human uniqueness, it obviously is the social emotional reasoning. Sensing is what, you know, give us the drive to be humans and differentiates us from the rest of the physical world, to put it in very simple terms. But this is, again, it's only an estimation and it can always change. Now, if you move forward, let's try and focus from, you know, going away from the negative side to the practical aspect. So the industry has started using generative AI and AI wider in many respects. So it's been used in customer experience, in supply chain, human resources, etc., etc., etc. If we are to solely look at the higher education sector, there are only a few areas really where the universities have started engaging with it. And that's in fraud detection. AI has become very good at detecting fraudulent documents. Predictive analytics. Universities have massive amounts of data about their students, about their applicants. They know, you know, what type of applicants they're looking for. They're collecting the data. A lot of actors or some of our competitors, such as QS, Times Higher Education, BMI, for example, they use a lot of data. Enrollee, Applyboard's recently just released their own AI model. You can Google it. It's called Abby. It's only relevant to a couple of select clients, but they are using it in analytics just to kind of tell universities, you know, about the student profiles. They are using these advanced technologies and applying them to obviously increase their research and development capabilities, customer insights, and fraud detection. If we go a bit further down into the risk, I am saying, you know, there's obviously a lot of developments happening, and it is a bit of a kind of a wild west currently, because there's no regulation on this type of technology because it's so new. However, interestingly, the EU is a bit ahead of the time. So they've come out with an AI legal framework, and they are going to implement this in 2026. I'm slightly skeptical about 2026 because who knows what's going to happen in 2026. I mean, this might be out of date by 2026 already. But what's important to keep in mind is that there's a lot of regulation coming. So the EU will classify these types of AI in high risk, unacceptable risk, limited risk, or minimal risk. And, you know, at a very kind of basic level, I'm not going to bore you with all the details. If you want to read it, it's online, it's free, it's about 700 pages. I've used AI to summarize it. I might have another look, but who knows? But basically, high-risk systems will be the ones that can essentially change someone's livelihood, from law enforcement to migration management, administration of justice. And this is where AI is drawing a line and saying, we're not going to allow any company to develop this kind of software or apply it. That's on the EU side. If we go to the other side of the world, in China, this has already been implemented. Social scoring has been increasingly used and very sophisticatedly developed. The US has been sometimes at the forefront of kind of prototyping these types of technologies that the EU is considering still unethical. But usually China is the first when it comes to adoption to a wide scale. So what we're seeing now, we're going to see a very big AI race, pretty much with the US and China at you know, at kind of leading the forefront of innovation and development, and then we'll have the EU and wider Europe kind of regulating it and trying to think of ways to properly kind of put it into frameworks. The unacceptable risk. So again, we've talked about the the high risk and unacceptable risk. And obviously, I mean, you know, from the high risk, we can go to the unacceptable one, where they are talking about voice assistant that encourages dangerous behavior. And they're using very light language here because they don't want to scare people. But basically what they're referring to is about autonomous AI agents that can potentially alter someone's lives. Think about drones, think about any type of very small robotics, autonomously independent machines that can alter someone's life easily. So again, it's quite a lot to unpick. When we move into the more limited risk and minimal risk, here we're talking about technologies that we're already using, we're kind of used to. So that's AI-enabled video games, spam filters, chatbots, stuff like ChatGPT, which is in itself to some extent pretty harmless. I'm saying pretty harmless because sometimes if a lot of these agents or AI chatbots can pretend to be humans and they can be very, very realistic when it comes to it. Interesting thing about that, the legislation that is going to come about, and this is probably to some of our comfort, is that all this legislation will require that anytime someone releases a chatbot or has some type of robot or chatbot that users interact with, by law, they will have to explicitly say they are non-human. So, in practical terms, if students are to interact with a chatbot, by law, they will have to understand that, the other side of the interaction is not an actual human being and that they are talking to an artificial intelligence model. So at least to some extent, we have this kind of comfort that at least we will be told if we interact with artificial intelligence models. But that doesn't say that everyone will respect it, especially to start with. So we are getting to the point now that AI has become so good, not just at generating text, but even creating, virtual copies of, let's say, of myself, cloning my voice, and absolutely being able to have a proper conversation with someone. To the point that we wouldn't be able to detect it. So that's where this legislation will come into play and will be very effective. So we talked about a few challenges, ethical considerations, but I think one of the most interesting one that's going to affect the higher education is what are the future skills and what are the skills that will require or that our future generations will require to interact with these AI systems. What will be considered an essential skill in school? How will AI competency affect someone's likelihood to get a job? How will AI be integrated in future jobs? These are very hard questions, and I think schools and universities are now under pressure to answer these questions. When you're thinking about sending a child to an education system and you're thinking about a future kind of career, a lot of the industry experts, except for medicine or very kind of science-based fields, won't be able to give you an exact answer, even if we ask them what's going to happen in the next 5 years, because the reality is people have tried to predict where or how AI would evolve, and they got it completely wrong. No one could predict that generative AI would come out as it came. The initial prediction in 2015 was that AI would automatize all manual labor. So in 2015, people thought that in the next 10 years' time, we won't have any more builders. We won't need necessarily structural engineers. We won't need painters. That will all be robots doing the jobs for us. And that the most protected jobs would be the knowledge ones, the creative ones. And today is the exact opposite. Now the creative jobs are at risk, writing jobs, generative jobs, knowledge creation or summarization jobs. So things have taken a turn and they have really kind of taken a lot of people by surprise. Now, if you really want to go further down into the subject, I can recommend you a couple of books. And I think these still stand the test of time. These really provide you with a foundation to further understand all the new technological advancements that come through. I think Stefan Popenich's book is probably the most relevant one, which I will highly recommend. And that specifically talks about AI in higher education. So it really paints a very good picture of how AI has been influencing the higher education since the late 80s and the 90s over into the future. Now, moving a bit forward when it comes to research, so a lot of researchers and universities have started using AI. I mean, there's a lot of ethical consideration in AI-assisted research. I'm not going to go too much into it, but just to give you an example, there's literally tens of AI-powered engines coming out every single day. These are some of the most popular popular ones now. But as I'm speaking, there's probably someone working on the next one. Universities have been very quick at adopting a lot of these technologies and engines simply because it saves academics a lot of time, from doing the research to writing the books to publishing papers. This won't be long till it will go into the student area as well. So especially students that will be doing research-based work, they will be able to go onto these tools, which are now fairly expensive, but they will be getting cheaper and cheaper, to the point that our current understanding of doing research will completely shift in the next 5 years. And again, that's the same with knowledge production, summarization, and so on. Just to give you a very kind of basic example, and this is one of my favorite ones that I always talk about and that I have used at universities and that we have trialed it at my past university. So think about, we have a book, right? So we're feeding a book to this engine, and it splits the screen into two. So on the left-hand side, we have a summary, and on the right-hand side, we have the actual text. So what happens really when you look on the left-hand side, you can see a summary there of the main information. There's another function here to say if this is a 500-page book on every single topic in medicine, but you really want to focus on a particular type of medicine, so let's just say on surgery, you can ask the engine to only summarize the whole book, but only based on the very topic that you're interested in surgery. So it saves you a lot of time of having to obviously to go through and read the parts that you really need. Now, the reason I think this is a very useful engine, and this is an engine on which a lot of other tools will be used, is because every single time you click on a paragraph that's been summarized, you can see in real time where that information was taken from. So you can fact check and cross-check to make sure that the information is correct at the same time in real time. So this is really a game changer when it comes to doing research, to writing papers. And this can be useful not just for academics, but it can be useful for us. If we want to read a report that's lengthy, like a British Council report or a government policy on international admissions or education purposes, this is something we could potentially use to speed up our reading and understanding of a lot of these things. Obviously, now these AI models are great at translating them in various languages. So even if we are interested in a policy that's perhaps written in another language, but we don't have an easy way to translate it, we can use these engines to help us translate it in virtually pretty much any language or any of the mainstream languages that we can think about. Now, where do we start? I mean, that's always a very good question, and I think I haven't really kind of updated this on purpose. I was thinking whether I should update this or not. So when I produced this presentation just last week, and a couple of days ago it became out of date. And simply by the fact that now I should have really added music as well. So currently, generative AI is extremely good at producing text, image, sound, video, and music. And when I'm saying it's extremely good at it, I'm being very critical and I'm being very strict. And when I'm saying that, I mean that we won't be able to tell the difference between a human-generated piece of information to a synthetic artificial intelligence piece of production. I've tested this personally. I've written both text, created images, sounds, videos. I've cloned myself. I've cloned myself in several different languages, saying several different things, and I've sent it to my family. And not a single member of my family could tell which one was the real me, or which one was actually my voice and not a synthetically generated voice. So I can tell you it's as real as it gets, and this is only going to get better and better. The popular ad platforms, as I said, we've got platforms coming out every single day, but probably you will be seeing these ones to be the most popular. I think that probably the mainstream one is ChatGPT. That's what everyone's used to because they were the first ones to popularize generative AI, but also they're pretty much the best at it. So, I don't think there's a tool better than ChatGPT now in terms of all its kind of multimodal capabilities. Copilot is a version of ChatGPT built on the Microsoft infrastructure. So a lot of the universities you will be interacting with are most likely using Copilot. The difference is that Microsoft is adding some extra layers of security on top of ChatGPT's technology. And this is very important for universities because obviously universities are data controllers and processors. So, the GDPR rules still apply to using AI. The problem is when you're feeding potentially sensitive information into an engine like ChatGPT, you don't know where that information is going. What's more than that, OpenAI uses that data for its training. On top of that, anyone at any point can potentially reveal that data. So you'll see there's quite a lot of lawsuits happening now against ChatGPT because sometimes it has revealed training data. So what it means is if I'm talking to ChatGPT today, I'm telling it some of my problems. That's not to say that potentially when you're talking about it tomorrow and you maybe ask some questions about me, it might all of a sudden just say hallucinate and just tell you exactly what I told you yesterday. Again, which can be a fairly kind of scary concept. Now let's adopt this and put it into a higher education perspective. You have very sensitive data about students, about grades, about ethnicity, and all these data that some companies would like to mine. So we already have a lot of companies around the world that don't have the best intentions, that will try to hack data, that will try to steal personal information, that are trying to actively put pressure on services like ChatGPT to reveal their training information or the information they interact with customers about. So this is where Microsoft, for example, comes and adds an extra layer of protection and tells universities, well, we have our own version. The information stays within your university ecosystem. It doesn't leave. We call it Copilot. It's not ChatGPT. It's very likely that Microsoft will be releasing their own version of AI probably later this year, since they've just hired a new AI CEO. But for the time being, Copilot will be the university's, especially in the UK, first preference. On top of that, we'll have Gemini, which is run by Google, Poe, which kind of gives you access to a variety of types of AI models, Claude, which is the main ChatGPT competitor, so different technology built by a company called Anthropic. And then we have Perplexity, which is a great engine that combines ChatGPT and Claude and connects it to the internet. So I'll give you an example. If you really want to make sure that the data you search for using an AI model is taken, it has proper sources from the internet, you can use Perplexity. It's free and it's very good at giving references from online sources. If you really want to have strong reasoning capabilities, my choice is always ChatGPT. It produces the best text, it has the best understanding, it's got the best reasoning. If you want the capability to process very large amount of data, so books or reports of hundreds of pages, that option will be Claude or Gemini, because they can understand way more in terms of volume than ChatGPT. They might not be as good as reasoning, but at least they will understand and summarize better than ChatGPT does, for example, simply because in simple terms, they have a better memory. They can remember way more information than ChatGPT can, for example. Now we go to the creative side. So I was talking about, a lot of these tools that are creating more than just text. So obviously we've talked about ChatGPT, Gemini, Perplexity. These tools will be, mostly used to generate text, maybe sometimes images, but there's a bunch of different models now that will generate everything from images to sound to music to videos, that will generate video from video, text to video, music from text, music from music, music from sound, or sound from text. So, we'll in a couple of years' time, we'll get to the point where we'll simply just speak to an AI model and tell it we want to see this, or we want to hear a type of music that sounds like this with these lyrics, and it will make it for us in a couple of minutes. Most of these here, by the way, are free to try. So I put it here. You can take a screenshot and you can do a bit of research if you'd like, or have a bit of fun, because some of them will be fairly fun to interact with, especially if you're a creative person and you have a lot of ideas and a lot of imagination. And I think there's another one as well. So in case you are really, passionate about the creative side, but also if you want to interact with universities about how they're using that in their creative suite, there is a range of tools that universities have started to adopt now. Adobe is one of them, because Adobe has Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, Premiere Pro. They've integrated AI in all of their products, so that now in order to edit images, you don't have to have great Photoshop skills. You can easily do it in Adobe. I mean, you simply use natural language, and Adobe will generate stuff for you, or will change videos, images, etc. for you. Universities have been quite receptive at the creative side, so they are trying to engage with it. They are giving students quite a lot of access to a lot of these tools. From a research perspective, but they also want to test a bit creativity and see, what are the downsides of AI when it comes to creativity. And a very simple one is bias. A lot of these models will be trained on a particular data set, which will be mostly Western white, usually from the US. If you try to be a bit creative and a bit diverse, you will probably have some issues. You'll have to really prompt these models if you want to make something that's, let's say, non-Western. Of course, you can go on the side of using a Chinese model, which will have a completely different set of training data. And I think there's been the issue with the Chinese models is that they've been fairly private and hard to access. But recently, they've been some competitors to OpenAI, to Midjourney, that have released their models to the public in preview. So in the next couple of months, we will be seeing more diversity when it comes to these models from different parts of the world. It might be that we will start seeing models from the Middle East, from Africa, from Eastern Europe. And it's an interesting space to watch out. If you really want to have a look at I think probably one of the most pressing issues, and that's the deepfake technology. That's the ability of someone potentially cloning someone, their voice, their appearance, and even their movements. Synthesia and HeyGen, they've led the technology in these areas. So these are literally engines where you can create highly realistic human avatars that have facial expressions, that have very realistic voices, and you can take a step further and choose to clone yourself, for example. So I've tested this with both Synthesia and HeyGen, and again, they are scarily accurate. They don't just clone my voice, they clone my accent, they clone my tendencies, the way I pause when I speak. Sometimes if I mispronounce words, they'll pick up on it. So they're extremely proficient, let's put it in that way. You will hear probably a lot about open source frameworks. I'm not going to go too much into it because it is quite technical, but really just wanted to give you a very top level of how these systems work. And usually when universities choose at building this system, they will try to go open source or build their technology on top of existing models. So one of the most famous one is called Llama, and Llama is actually a Facebook model, so a meta model. So Facebook has developed their own AI system as well, and Facebook is allowing companies to use their underlying technology, their way of training, and build models on top of it. There's obviously quite a technical journey to go from the foundation model, so where we have Facebook's AI model, all the way to a front end where users can interact with it. But it is becoming easier and easier to implement this. So as I said at the beginning, this technology is advancing so quickly that it's hard to keep up with everything. And pretty much all the big tech companies now have their own AI models, and they're going about it in slightly different ways. iPhone is going to focus on computer vision, so Apple and computer vision. They're going to focus on the ability of AI to interact with other AIs to deliver value. Companies like Facebook will use their underlying models to allow companies to build on top of their models. OpenAI ChatGPT will focus on being the number one, very multimodal, good at everything type of AI. That's going to be the first choice of everyone. Microsoft probably will focus on being the secure version for enterprise and universities. And this is a limited number of companies. The number is increasing, and the technology is getting better pretty much every month that we're seeing. This is just a basic demonstration to show you how Microsoft's Copilot security works. So basically, all this shows is that the data really stays within the boundaries of the Microsoft ecosystem. So even if we want to implement it in your workplace or SMS or education or UApp, if we go for a infrastructure that's built on Microsoft, that uses a model from Microsoft, that means we have control of the data and of the large model. We're not going to be worried about that data being potentially leaked out of the organization. And just to finish it off, so I always get asked the question, how do you become good at AI? Where do we start? How do we learn? Do we need to do a course? And, my advice and what I've seen through training a lot of people and delivering a lot of sessions is very simple. The more you use it, the better you understand it and the better you get at using it. Most of the people I've trained and most of the people I've worked with are people that have used AI consistently, and not just for the benefit purpose of its generation abilities, but rather simply to learn how to interact with these models. One of the main issues I always get is that people can't ask the right information of the model. So in technical term, the art of talking to an AI, this is what Microsoft terms as prompt engineering. But prompt engineering, really, it sounds like a very technical term and maybe a bit off-putting. But what it means, it just means instructions. So prompt engineering is really giving good enough instructions to a model to make sure that you get the right information from it. The issue with these models, they have so much knowledge that if you ask them a very vague question, you can get a very random answer simply because there's so many variables. So for example, if you ask it, tell me a poem, it can literally tell you a poem from every part of the world at whatever point it feels to do it. And if I ask it for a poem and if you ask it for a poem, we'll have very different poems that will come out of these models. However, if you do know exactly how to ask for, let's say, for a poem that's in a certain style, from a certain country, from a certain culture, from a certain ethnicity or religion, then you will start seeing the benefits of it. And I think one of the main issues is that we as humans, we're not used to talking to machines in this very natural language. We're used to interacting with computers in a very on-off, do this, do that. But these models, they've been built and to work by actually having conversations with them. So that means we might not always get the response straight away, but we'll get the response if we'll have a conversation with the robot. And it can be off-putting, I know, because we're essentially interacting with a machine just like we would with another human being. So this is a hard to kind of mental barrier to go past in order to unlock, the real kind of value that these models can deliver. And with this comes, quite a big learning journey. You'll understand when the model hallucinates, why, well, probably not why it does it, but at least you'll understand how to fact check it sometimes. And again, here, just to give you some very basic advice, Microsoft has kind of four principles that are very easy when you to kind of work with. Having an end goal in mind, providing context, adding a source for an example, and setting expectations. As long as you keep these four principles in mind, you can minimize the hallucination rate of the model, but also make sure that you get the most of it as you're interacting with it. In other words, you'll be able to access this on. I'm going through a lot of concepts quickly, but you can always go back to the slide or to the recording and kind of interact with it if you want. And here's a very basic example of where AI gives the wrong answer when you don't give it enough information. So on the right hand side, you can see where you've given it enough information, it will solve a mathematical equation correctly. However, on the left hand side, if there's not enough information in there, it will give you the wrong answer. So obviously here, if you're doing an exercise for someone, you're giving them the correct answer or the wrong answer, it wouldn't be great if you didn't actually fact check what's coming out of it. So just a caveat to when interacting with these. I'll give you another very basic example. So this is what I've generated using Midjourney. So by the way, these people don't exist, they're fully generated. This is generated using a model from last year. The current models from this year are way more realistic than these ones, but this is just to exemplify how prompt engineering works. So, on the left-hand side, I've asked the model to give me a portrait of a happy graduate student. It gave me a fairly generic picture. However, on the right-hand side, I actually gave it more information. I said, well, I want a happy graduate student that's wearing a hat. And I went even further. I said, well, I want it to be photographed by a type of camera that I use. I've given it the technical details and I've given it some parameters to work in. And it produced these versions of it, which was way more aligned to what I needed. And the quality was also a lot higher. Am I an expert photographer? No. Did I really understand all those technical terms? No. I used AI. I explained to ChatGPT what kind of photo I would like. I showed it an example, and it told me, well, actually, you would benefit from this type of camera. So then I just went to the image generation model, and I provided it with the with the technical information about the camera, and I got the desired outputs in this. So again, this is the power of instructions. Some will call it prompt engineering. I'll just say this is just instruction. As long as you can communicate good instructions to a model, you will get very good results. If you will communicate poorly, you won't get very good results, and you might be off-put by the model. So this is a kind of an area that I'm working on. This is a framework I've developed to simply put into terms the level of ability of using AI combined with the subject matter expertise. And it might look slightly off-putting or complicated, but it's really simple in at the foundation level. I'm working here on two precepts: that the best way to make use of an AI model is to firstly be really good and understand the field that you're asking the model to work in. And secondly, to have a good understanding of how to use the model. If you're not going to have either a good understanding of using the model or a good understanding of the field, there will be certain risks. And I'll give you an example. If you are, let's say, really good at using the model, but are not great at the knowledge in itself of the field, you might deal sometimes with inaccurate information. Sometimes you might get hallucinatory, incorrect information that you might not be able to fact check yourself. However, if you're good at using the model and you understand this, then you can question certain areas. You can cross-reference. If you don't understand how the model works and you're not really good at the subject matter either, you're very likely to take that as the truth and obviously get false information from the model. Now, if we swap the spectrum and look at at the ideal way, if you do have let's say if you have a great subject matter expertise, but you don't know how to use the model, you will get very poor results. And obviously, as a subject matter expert, you will become very frustrated because you won't get the desired result, and you will know that a lot of the stuff you're getting is nonsense. But that won't be because of the model itself, but rather because of your own level of using the model. So again, I think this is an easy spectrum to kind of understand that you kind of need these two key components to add to the skill mix, understanding how to use a model, but very importantly, knowing the sector that you're asking questions about. Implementation considerations. A lot of people now, as I said, it's a very trendy topic. Everyone talks about an AI strategy. I don't really believe in AI strategies myself. I think AI should be integrated as part of the digital transformation journey, which is an ongoing technological journey of any companies. AI can literally be or is already implemented in so many parts of digital tools, of technology, that really it has to be a holistic approach to it that's integrated or not integrated in as many areas at an organization that can happen. I think, don't get me wrong, I think AI can be a great tool. On the other hand, I'm very critical of it. I always adopt a balanced approach. I'm not an overhyper. I don't think I'm too much of a skeptic either, but I try to maintain a balance. And I think AI can definitely use for some things, but I'm sure that AI should definitely not be used for other things as well. So it really depends on the use case and the sector that we work in. So this has been a quick whistle tour of AI in potential application in artificial intelligence in higher education. I appreciate it's been a lot of information, so I'm happy to take any questions, but also happy to do any obviously follow-up questions and focus on more kind of focused areas as the technology evolves. Any questions? Or everyone's
I think it was a lot of information that people have just started to digesting it. But it was an interesting webinar, Cato, I must say. There are a lot of technical terms so we were not familiar with. So just to let you guys know, this will be updated on our YouTube channel after the webinars get edited. So if you do want to check back Oh, Nicoletta got a question.
I was wondering if you know the best app that can be used to check if someone used ChatGPT or AI. For example, I use Zero ChatGPT, but not always it's accurate. Maybe you know one better.
So
Thank you.
unfortunately not. So the best one, or so they say, is Turnitin. And Turnitin works with universities. So they do the plagiarism check and they say they can detect AI. But most universities I've spoken to reject it. So even the universities are not using any tools because it's simply not possible to fully detect if something's been AI generated or not. I can give you some tips when it comes to detecting potentially AI generated content. There is certain, or there are quite a few words that AI models are very likely to use. And if you Google them, you'll probably get a list of about 10 to 15. The issue is now everybody's using it. So that kind of cluster of words is becoming increasingly used in most text. So by default, we'll probably get those words into the human vocabulary quite soon. At the beginning, they were easy to spot out because there's only a few, but now they're plateauing. So I think to be on the safe side, I don't think there's a good way to detect AI generated content. Legislation will help us once it comes in towards the end of the year, but it's not very clear if that's going to work in when it comes to text. When it comes to voice or video, there will probably be clear watermarks on it. But sorry to disappoint, but no, I don't think there's any reasonable or definite way to detect AI generated content just yet.
Oh, thank you.
And by the way, if you have a question tonight whilst you're going to bed or tomorrow or in the shower, you can always feel free to send me a message. Always very happy to answer. I appreciate it's a lot of information. Obviously, if you can watch the recording back on YouTube. There's slides as well you can access. So again, feel free. Don't feel any pressure to ask any questions now if you don't exactly know what to how to digest.
Tori has a question in the chat box if you want to have a look.
Yeah, just a second. Let's see. Ooh, optimistic or pessimistic about the future of AI? But it depends. I mean, there's so many ways to look at it. I look at it optimistically. I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic. I think the reason why a lot of people are being pessimistic is because there's obviously this anxiety about AI potentially replacing our jobs or replacing the very thing that makes us human. But I don't buy it. And I'll come this from, I'm a chess player. I've played chess since I was young. I've always enjoyed playing chess. When a computer could beat me at chess, that didn't stop me enjoying chess. I'm still playing chess with other humans because I enjoy the human element. I don't think I'll ever enjoy playing chess with an AI, especially if it's going to be so much better at me. I really see the potential of AI really making our lives a bit easier, getting off all the boring tasks and helping us focus on what we really like to do. There will be some shift in jobs. I'm sure that's definitely gonna be inevitable. But I think at the same time, whilst we are gonna be getting rid of some jobs, we'll be creating new ones. I think probably the scale of work we're used to doing now will increase, but that's simply because we'll have more power. So instead of me being required to write a 5-page report, maybe I'll be required to write 100. But I think that will probably be easier than writing 5 with this new technology that I'm going to be getting. So again, I think it's definitely a matter of perspective, but I tend to be optimistic. Lenke, okay. Do you think AI can affect how children will learn in school and how it can affect their development? Yes, I think that's probably the biggest problem. And I think this is something that universities and schools have a challenge. We know it's definitely going to affect them. We don't know how, but I can give you some examples. So for example, it's been showed over and over time that handwriting is way better for brain development than typing, simply because we activate other parts of our brains when we write different words on paper rather than typing, which is a more kind of monotonous, continuous type of process. So that's at a very basic level how we've kind of started going into slightly different areas than the traditional way of learning. I don't think scientists currently understand how moving from writing to typing has necessarily impacted our development. I don't think it's been much concern so far, but I think what we'll see in AI will be similar. I mean, I can give you a very basic example I'm not particularly happy with because I think it oversimplifies things. But, think about the calculators and homework, mathematics homework before kids, had to do a lot of the mathematical simple equations or simple calculations as homework. But once the calculator was invented, the teachers at the time said, well, how are our kids, gonna learn how to do counting and mathematics if they have these calculators on that will just do the operations for them? But that, eventually that wasn't a problem because, the teachers found more creative ways or more complicated problems that, students could do at home. So again, I'm being optimistic that potentially, we will find more creative ways of teaching children how to develop. And, I grew up in Romania and I went to school in Romania and, I hated school just because it was a very memorization type of exercise where I just had to memorize everything and then kind of reproduce it. I don't think I took a lot of value from it because I was very good at cheating. So instead of actually memorizing, I was just writing it and putting down somewhere or hiding it. It's not a great example to give, I know, but I can't say the educational system did me a great favor. So, I can be optimistic and say, perhaps there's better way than these types of memorization exercises. And hopefully this is a good challenge that the education system needs to become better at providing us with the skills that are actually going to help us in life and hopefully will shape the future generations. I hope that answers. It's a long answer. I hope it it answered the question. Other question?
Yeah, I have a last question also.
Yeah.
Can I please ask?
Sure,
So,
Linda.
yeah, so considering that like it's going crazy actually, especially with this ChatGPT, and it can analyze reports by uploading like PDFs or even Excel, I just gave a try, for example, Excel documents and everything. So considering that, like let's say we can be a little bit scared. I mean, the marketers, or I don't know, the business development departments and things like that. So is this maybe, I mean, I'm pretty sure that it will develop more, even more, and as I said in the beginning, it's going crazy. So, is this a way that maybe on the other side, any new, I don't know, like technologies, or there will be another way, like how the market will go and new job opportunities in another type of model? I'm not really sure. I mean, like what's going to happen, because not lots of companies will need, like, let's say 4 or 5 marketers where ChatGPT will do everything and just one will implement, all of those things.
Yeah, I think it's a very good point you're raising, Linda. And it depends. I think there's definitely some scope for when it comes to small, medium businesses that they might look at replacing marketing functions with potential engines that can do stuff. But there's always going to need the strategic direction and the human supervision outputs. In terms of marketing, for example, I think AI is great at reproducing text, but it's not great at understanding current trends without the data. We might get to a point where you will get these AI models, some very advanced capabilities that it can do real-time analysis of data and influence kind of market decisions. But I think you will still need human input to make sure that that data is, on one hand, that it makes sense from a business strategy perspective, and secondly that it's also ethical, or it kind of adheres to governance and legal frameworks. I think you're right when it comes to analysis. I think it's more than just Excel. I've seen it used at the large scale to power up visual dashboards, for example, in Power BI, plugging into multiple data sets. But I don't see it as an issue. I think that's just empowered a lot of the marketing team. So I'm building currently a marketing department and a data analysis department at Ectis, at the organization I work. And yeah, we're hiring. We're not firing people just because there's so much analysis to be done. There's so much, there's so much connection of the data, and we have to understand how we can connect this data. Because what's happening with these powers, that's really, I mean, we know we have a lot of data. There's a lot of data available. Currently, the issue is we don't have enough people to analyze the data and get the insights from it. So now I think AI comes in as a tool that will help and empower more of these people to make use of these data sets better. So the way I see it now, from my perspective as a hiring manager, I'm not looking at investing in systems that will automate this. I'm looking at people that can understand these systems, that can use them to derive value, that can talk to my customers, that can train my staff, and then working together to find new business model avenues. I think we definitely need human input. So I wouldn't be too concerned if I were you on that side.
Yeah, I got it. Thank you.
Right. So I got another question. Don't you think the real risk with AI is competence and not abuse? Sidra, do you want to further explain that? Are you talking about AI making people dumber as opposed to it potentially being abused or making them more lazy, or is it something else that you're referring to?
No, like with AI, I can, become a poet even though I'm not. And it's giving me that power to be something, even though I don't have this real skill.
Mm. Well, that's a very interesting one. So I'm gonna paraphrase someone. So if you'd like to further explore I think this is a very interesting and cool question. There's a professor called Alexander Manu, who's a professor of arts at the University of Toronto in Canada. And he's a poet himself. So he was interviewed. You can find the interview on YouTube, and he was interviewed by one of the leading futurists in the world. The guy's Romanian, by the way. There's no connection. He just happens to be Romanian. I swear I don't just look at Romanian authors. They just pop out, and I just mentioned them. His idea is that what AI will do, it will actually filter out the imposters. And he gives a very basic example and says he, as a poet, he's asked ChatGPT to, he's asked it a very basic question. And the question was, why does the world cry? And from the answer, he got a poem that then he constructed himself, and he shared it with his community, and no one could tell it was AI generated. Everyone kind of assumed it was him. And his point is that, a wannabe poet would not be able to ask that kind of question to ChatGPT. And the point he's really trying to make is that the real creative people and the talented people, we always have the upper hand when interacting with these models, because it will really be their creativity and talent that will drive the valuable content that comes out of them. Of course, there will be a moment in time where not everyone will be using it, and some people might appear to be more than what they are. But eventually, once everyone else catches up, I think it's going to be clear to see who's actually got the talent and the creativity and the knowledge, as opposed to the people that just try to make something from very basic things, because everyone will be doing it. So I think we're just going to probably evolve to use these tools better and better, while maintaining our kind of same difference in talent and creativity.
I think it comes back to the framework that you were talking about. If you have the skill, then you can, get the best result from AI. Okay,
No,
thank you.
Absolutely, yeah. I think I don't see any other question, unless there's anyone that wants to raise their hand.
No, I don't see anything else either, Cato. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was, very interesting, I must say, and come across quite a few new things which we are not aware of as a, group or individual.